Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Great to have everyone here. We had a fantastic program last night. I'll tell you, I received more messages from last night's program than I have from any other program in the past probably month, maybe even longer. I think it was one of the best shows that we've had in maybe the past year. We had our new friend Sarah on the program, and I think she did very well here. A young person who shared her views and thoughts on politics, some culture questions. We even got into some discussions on relationships today. So I was brought up to speed on that front. Boy, times have changed, I'll tell you. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. I just want to thank Sarah again for coming on the program last night. It was great, and I can tell you that people, really appreciated what she brought to the table last night, and I certainly did too. So, thank you, Sarah. So tonight, foreign interference front and center. We're getting back into our regular daily news coverage and commentary here. Jagmeet Singh, NDP in Canada, wants to take the investigation into foreign interference in Canadian politics to a little bit more, a more extensive level. He wants to he's targeting the Conservatives. I'll tell you how. The issue of discrimination has reared its head. We have a body that is calling for not so much an investigation, because Canada has already, in their view, is already being basically convicted of this issue. So I think what they're calling for is more like accountability. It's like the verdict is already in, but I don't know. I'll explain when we get to it. Now, not only is Canada in the crosshairs on the discrimination issue through this watchdog government, what is it? It's an accountability group of some kind. I don't know what to call them, but anyway, they're taking this straight to the UN. So you've got the discrimination thing, and then on the other side of this, you have today Canada's Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, rolling out the government's plan for a capital gains tax increase. But it is much more than that. I will tell you why. It's really the first shot across the bow in what promises to be class warfare heading into the next federal election in this country. Now, you combine those two things, and I'll tell you, plus the whole issue of immigration. Canada is on the precipice. This is my analysis going into tonight's program. Canada is on the precipice of some sort of a major revolution, potentially, similar to what happened in South Africa when you saw the ANC take over in that country. I'll explain it. You don't need to believe it because I know that so many people out there are in denial that all this political upheaval is happening. It isn't, and in my view, it's not so much race-based. It is, but it isn't. It's political. Wildfire update from out west. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh my goodness. Heads are blowing up all over the world, especially in the U.S., where she says she compared Donald Trump to Jesus. If that isn't enough to trigger some people, a terrorism warning issued for Canadians who might be traveling to Europe. $750 million for Quebec to deal with the surge in immigration. A Wyoming highway that has literally fallen off a cliff. And you're not going to want to miss this. This is going to be the highlight of the whole night. My dad is going to tell us some jokes. Yeah, my dad. It's going to be awesome. My dad is like a joke encyclopedia. I mean, there are dad jokes, and then there's my dad's jokes. Because he's just, I don't know how he does it. He just has all these jokes memorized. So he's going to make us smile a little later in the program. So stay with me. We have a lot in store tonight.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching.
The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I stayed up late producing that promo, and then I'm running it and I'm watching it here now hours later. And you know what came to mind because of the guy saying that all the crazy dictators are watching? It reminded me of Steve Martin, right? One wild and crazy dictator. Yeah, just like Justin Trudeau. Oh, one wild and crazy dictator guy. Oh man. Okay, let's get serious because we've got serious stuff to talk about here tonight. Talking about these politicians, these dictators, they're all nuts. They are crazy. And And you have to wonder which of these crazy dictators is sticking their fingers into Canadian politics. Who's got their sticky fingers on Canada? Canada's Minister of Democratic Institutions, Dominic LeBlanc, says Liberals do support an effort to expand the scope of the foreign interference inquiry so it can investigate allegations against members of Parliament, because we've seen evidence that members of Parliament are corrupt. We've seen statements that indicate our intelligence services know who they are, and they're not telling us who they are. So Liberals, this is becoming an election issue. So now the Libs in the House, they're saying, oh yeah, we support expanding the investigation. Well, at the same time, they refuse to give you the information. And now this new development, this is it makes me laugh, but it's so serious. I mean, it actually does represent an existential threat to Canada. It really truly does. You have members of Parliament who apparently are on the take. They're corrupted, or they're working with foreign actors. We're not allowed to know who they are because they're afraid of revealing their sources and methods to gather this intelligence. So they just go about their merry business, still undermining Canada, I guess, in the meantime. But now, the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, came out with this. This is very interesting. He is calling for the expansion of the inquiry. And we had this whole inquiry. It went on for days and days and days and days. All this evidence being rolled out. We covered it here if you were paying any attention. It's a real thing. This is actually happening. Now Jagmeet Singh wants the inquiry expanded so that they investigate the Conservatives. And he's singling out Poilievre because Pierre Poilievre of the Conservative Party of Canada has been scoring big points on this issue against Trudeau. And he doesn't have access to the classified information because he has refused to sign non-disclosure agreement in order to see the top secret information so that he can continue to be critical of it. It's a trap if he signs that so he can see what the information is, because if he signs it, they'll show it to him, but then he can't talk about it. So he'll find out what the corruption is, but then he can't tell the Canadian people. So he's just calling for the information to be released to the public. Apparently he doesn't know. So now Jagmeet Singh is saying that the Conservative leadership was influenced by foreign actors. And then by extension, then you see, I'm seeing claims made, I would say they're pro-liberal bloggers, influencers, suggesting that maybe Pierre Poilievre is in the bag for a foreign government. This is politics, kind of at the highest level here, getting really, really dirty. Let's go to Jagmeet Singh. Listen to this clip with the leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, and after we hear this, I'm going to tell you why I think we're getting it from him. Okay, let's get him up. Okay, Jagmeet, take it away.
The Anti-Cop report, we think it is very, very serious and deeply troubling that the Anti-Cop report indicates there are MPs that knowingly worked with foreign governments to undermine Canada. We also believe it's deeply concerning that the allegations the Anti-Cop raises also touch the Conservative leadership race. The idea that a foreign government was involved in the selection of the leader of the Conservative Party is deeply concerning, so much so that we are writing a letter demanding that the public inquiry into foreign interference in elections include the Conservative leadership race. It is that serious that it requires Canadians to know exactly what happened to understand how much, what happened, what was the interference, the extent to which a foreign government was involved in the selection of the leader of the Conservative Party. That is something Canadians ought to know. That's why we were writing that letter demanding its inclusion into the public inquiry.
Okay, so, now it gets spicy, doesn't it? Yeah. So now they're deflecting this. It's like a ricochet shot, and it's gone back, and they're trying to hit Poilievre straight right between the eyes with this shot. So we'll see where it goes, man. Why do I have this feeling that we're not ever going to get this information? And so by keeping it concealed, they do this ricochet shot, and it's going to come back and damage Poilievre. While we may not ever really know if they're even guilty of any wrongdoing here or who is. It seems to me that because Poilievre has been so aggressive about pursuing this, he must be clean. Otherwise, he would know that he was in deep trouble. So why would he push so hard? Now it's coming back to bite him. I don't know. We don't know who's dirty and who's clean. We don't know, but we should know. They should get this information out. Just a new development. Very interesting stuff heading into the next federal election. We really should be told before we go to the polls. Absolutely. And I kind of wonder, this could be an issue that, as I've said, is something the Liberals will hold in reserve until they get very close to Election Day, sort of the Canadian version of an October surprise. Because Trudeau knows. And he also knows what information will and will not be released. So it's not about truth, it's not about accuracy, it's not about transparency at all, it's about political strategy now. I've told people it's going to be a tough race, even though Poilievre is way out in front with the Conservatives in the polls. You can't count those Liberals out. They have a massive, super powerful election machine that is just beginning to kick into gear. And this is just first gear. You wait. It's going to get nasty and dirty. This is going to be an election so nasty and dirty, it's going to be like something you've not seen yet in Canadian history, in my opinion. And further evidence of that comes tonight from the new capital gains tax plan from the federal government, unveiled today in more detail by the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who presented this proposed capital gains tax series of changes to Parliament. This sets the stage for a crucial vote as the Liberals aim to challenge the Conservatives on this. It's a controversial tax issue. And I think the Liberals, again, I think that this is more about window dressing. Well, no, it's not. No, this will damage the country in ways that people can't foresee. I can see where it's going, but the majority of people will see it in an entirely different light because of the way the Libs are portraying this. Freeland has formally notified the House of Commons that a vote on increasing the capital gains inclusion rate is imminent, and this proposal is expected to generate, at least the government expects to generate, billions in new federal revenue. And so it'll be put to a vote, I think, Tuesday. Notably, Freeland chose to exclude this measure from the broader budget implementation bill, arguing that such a significant political decision warrants a separate vote. She emphasized the importance of this decision for the country's investments and urged Canadians to pay close attention to the MP's votes. Why? Because she's turning this into class warfare. This move forces Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and his caucus to clarify their stance on whether the wealthiest Canadians and businesses should pay more taxes. A spokesperson for Poilievre has stated that the Conservatives need more time to review the motion carefully, citing procedural delays. According to Finance Canada, the draft legislation won't be available until July, with the final decision likely postponed until the fall due to the summer parliamentary break. Despite this, any changes will apply to capital gains realized from June 25th of this month onward. So they're going to put it into effect before we even get all the final changes and details. Sounds like a plan. Not. Critics, including the Conservatives, argue that the government is scrambling and imposing a tax that will impact healthcare, home building, small businesses, farmers, retirees, and more. And it's true, it will. And this, I think, ultimately will result in less taxes being collected for because of the laws of economics. You will get a diminishing return on the increased tax rate because they will exceed the optimal tax rate based on a thing called the Laffer curve. They're taking it too far is what I'm saying. And so they're going to discourage investment. They're going to take too much money from those upper middle class people in particular and other wealthy people who own cottages, who make investments, and they're going to take way too much of it, of the money. So people will begin to hide their money. They'll stop investing it in Canada. They will sell off their assets, liquidate, and then some people are scrambling right now to sell off cottages, just get rid of them. So it's depressing market values already. It's not a good thing what they are doing. They're taking a pin and sticking it in the bubble of value and bursting it. Not that it's so much a bubble. It's like it's more like taking a machete and hacking off a giant portion of the actual true value of stuff because they're making it too expensive to own assets like a cottage. A primary residence is not caught up in this capital gains tax increase, but a secondary residence is, a cottage is, other investments are. The proposed tax change will increase the capital gains inclusion rate from 50% to 67% for individuals earning over $250,000 in capital gains annually, and for all gains realized by corporations and most types of trusts. This change is expected to affect the wealthiest 0.13% of Canadians, but it will affect far more than that. 0.13% of Canadians and around 12% of corporations, returning up to $19.4 billion projected to federal coffers over the next 5 years. However, there is plenty of empirical economic evidence to show that this kind of taxation, when it reaches this kind of level, results in actually less revenue being generated because it results in less investment into the economy. It extracts value from the economy. It means that, therefore, you end up with less productivity, less jobs created. When you start taking too much money away from the wealthy move away from the system. They start moving their money right out of the country. And they stop investing, which means it results in economic slowdown. If you have an economic slowdown, you stop collecting taxes all the way down the chain. It's a thing called the Laffer curve. You can look it up. Opponents, including doctors, business groups, argue that this policy will stifle economic growth and hurt future generations, which is exactly what I'm agreeing with here. I think that's true. And we've seen this happen in many countries. So a lot of tax groups, critics of the government, calling for a comprehensive review of Canada's tax system instead. Now, and despite all this, the Liberals are defending this proposal as a fair way to fund major investments in housing, pharmacare, childcare, blah, 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 blah. And here, let's listen to Chrystia Freeland talk about this. And I'll tell you this, what she says here today, what she's saying here, scares me. The reason it scares me is because this is not just about economic policy. This is the Liberals, low in the polls, grasping for something out of desperation, grasping for an issue that they can turn into something emotional to trigger people and solidify their base of support while driving a wedge between Canadians, the haves and the have-nots. They're going to employ class warfare heading into this next election, demonizing. They'll say it's the rich, but it's really not. It is the middle class, upper middle class, and above. So they're going to go after people who are making. See, when it's capital gains, it isn't even like somebody who's like really rich. It's people who have worked their fingers to the bone too, in order to afford the luxury of, say, a cottage. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily rich. It means they can be fairly well off and comfortable compared to the dirt poor in the country. But you need those middle class people and upper middle class people to fuel the economy, to prop things up. You need a robust, healthy middle class, upper middle class. Here she is. This is classic class warfare language here today. Listen very carefully to what she is saying. She's pitting Canadians against Canadians, the rich against the poor, the oppressed versus the oppressors.
But I would also like to ask Canada's 1%. In fact, Canada's 0.13% to consider this. What kind of a Canada do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where kids go to school hungry? Do you want to live in a country where a teenage girl gets pregnant just because she doesn't have the money to buy birth control?
Whoa. So if somebody has a cottage, like a family cottage, and they've had it for years, and they sell it because it's increased in value, that's a capital gain. They have to pay like 67, almost 70% of the value on that to the government. And if they don't do that, teenage girls are going to get pregnant. Oh. You see, this fuels resentment among the poor, gets people angry. This is a wedge issue. And it's dangerous because just like we saw during the pandemic, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Now it's the classic rich versus the poor, oppressed versus the oppressor. They don't care. Divide and conquer.
Do you want to live in a country where the only young Canadians who can buy their own homes are those with parents who can help with the down payment? Do you want to live in a country where we make the investments we need in healthcare?
Keep in mind that the reason young people can't afford to buy a house right now is because of the liberal economic policies. Too much money printing, inflation, reduced growth, suppressing growth, putting more and more people on welfare, which is a disincentive to work, which further decreases productivity, which means you have further goods and services on the market. With more money chasing fewer goods and services, you end up with inflation. That is the Liberals' fault. Plus, add immigration on top of that, record levels of new people coming into the country, and placing increasing demand on housing. You don't have enough to begin with, and you bring in another, say, 1 million people. Supply and demand. Real estate values skyrocket. Of course they want a capital gains increase. That's a huge windfall for the federal government as they inflate the prices of everything, especially real estate, which real estate prices have just about doubled. So you take all those secondary residences, all those cottages, all the other kinds of real estate, some of which has doubled in value. Then you increase on top of that the capital gains tax. And as those properties are sold over time, the government makes a killing because they get the inflated value back to them plus the increase in the tax rate. But over time, this will come back to bite the Canadian economy right on the butt.
In housing, in old age pensions, but we lack the political will to pay for them and choose instead to pass a ballooning debt onto our children.
That's the Liberals' fault too.
Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury? But
Trudeau has increased the debt more than all other previous prime ministers and governments combined.
Must do so in gated communities, behind ever higher fences, using private health care and airplanes, because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot.
Okay, I get it. And yeah, there is, there are rich people and there are poor people, and there always will be. And everybody wants fairness in the system, but I'll tell you, they're not doing this to be fair. They're doing this to blame all of their economic problems, which the Liberals have created, on big corporations and rich people, when in fact it's the socialist policies of the Liberal government and the NDP that have put us into this predicament to begin with. Now they're demonizing the rich, getting people angry, and this just helps accelerate this march toward more extreme leftist socialistic policies, which, as we've seen, also embrace, I'd say, some pretty disgusting, prejudicial, even bigoted ideology these days. So, beware, be careful what you vote for in the next election, guys. I don't think I have to tell anybody here anymore about her or Trudeau, but this is all doublespeak. It's not what she is pretending that it is. It's not really about generating more revenue. It is, but it isn't. And it's disgusting, because I've seen this happen in other countries over time. Canada's in a lot of trouble if we keep going down this road. Man, this is not the kind of Canada that I remember. Okay. Talking about discrimination. There is today, Canada's on notice. United Nations for discrimination. News conference held today in Ottawa. Black Class Action. It's a group. They held a news conference. They're involved with some other organizations. It's a coalition of human rights organizations. It's being led by the Black Class Action Secretariat. And this news conference was held today to discuss a UN body's special review of the accreditation status of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Back in February, the coalition asked the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, a UN organization that accredits human rights groups, to conduct the review, claiming the CHRC discriminates against its own employees. A subcommittee on accreditation has concluded there is sufficient evidence to place Canada under special review due to findings of systemic anti-Black discrimination at the CHRC. So this is Nicholas Marcus Thompson. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Black Class Action Secretariat. And he's joined by Nathan Preer, President of the Canadian Association of Professional Employees, and Bernadette Betchy, CHRC employee and one of the representative plaintiffs in this lawsuit, this international lawsuit, against the federal government by current and former Black and civil servants. Let's pick up this news conference now in Ottawa. This is, how shall I put this? This is a prelude of very serious things to come. I indicated at the beginning of the newscast that I think this is the beginning of a process that could easily take us down the road of South Africa, where you saw the end of apartheid in South Africa. This is the beginning of the same sort of process here in Canada. Mark my words. Here they are.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Marcus Thompson, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Black Class Action Secretariat, which is part of a coalition of human rights organizations that includes the Public Service Alliance of Canada, the National Union of Public and General Employees, the Canadian Black Nurses Alliance, the Enchanti Network, the Red Coalition, the Federation of Black Canadians, and the Canadian Association of Professional Employees. We're here today to provide a complaint that we launched back in February. Joining me today is Nathan Pryor, President of the Canadian Association of Professional Employees, and Bernadette Becci, a courageous employee of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, who is here with us to share her story. Thank you for being here with us today. Canada has long been seen as home to many nations, a champion of diversity, and a global leader of human rights. But our country is at risk of having that reputation irreparably damaged, with its human rights status now being examined by a United Nations oversight body. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights Subcommittee on Accreditation has concluded that there is sufficient evidence to place Canada under special review because of findings of systemic anti-Black discrimination at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. It is concerned about the institution's ability to comply with international human rights laws. This decision is unprecedented. Canada's human rights record has never been investigated by the United Nations in more than 30 years that it has been a member state. This now puts us among the ranks of nations like Russia, Iraq, and Venezuela, who have faced a special review. If Canada's A status is downgraded to B, it will lose speaking rights at the United Nations Human Rights Council, as well as voting rights and governance positions, not to mention the humiliation we will experience on the international stage. It is important to note that the evidence submitted that led to this decision came directly from two federal institutions, the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat and the Senate Human Rights Committee, which both concluded that the Canadian Human Rights Commission not only discriminated against Canadians seeking justice by dismissing complaints of racism, but also discriminated against their own employees. Let us be clear, these are not allegations. These are findings and conclusions by multiple federal institutions. It was these two reports that established enough grounds to re-examine Canada's international human rights standings. The Canadian government has acknowledged that anti-Black racism has persisted, and yet the government has failed to take concrete and tangible steps to address the issues, but they will tell you that they have. On Saturday afternoon, the day after the UN investigation was announced, the Liberal government released its anti-racism strategy for 2024 to 2028, highlighting a $110.4 million investment. But upon closer inspection, you can see that it is merely a repackaging of old funding and old commitments from 2022 and 2023. This is a clear attempt to distract from the embarrassment of this international investigation. The Liberals' 5-year strategy does not mention anything about creating improvements at the Canadian Human Rights Commission and the harms that they have perpetuated. By the government's own admission to its staff and the Canadian public, As a matter of fact, the government has cut critical funding for the Commission, leaving it with no choice but to cut programs. For far too long, the Canadian government has been in charge of investigating itself. How can it be those who have perpetrated these harms are then tasked with implementing the solutions? The result is a government that continues to serve platitudes, promises, reviews, and reports without any actual concrete change. There is no accountability when they don't meet their own commitments.
Okay. Did you pick up on the wording? Are you cluing in? He says, these are not allegations, these are findings. In other words, even without an actual trial or hearing, just the investigation and a conclusion is enough to put Canada into a position of being guilty of these allegations. So no longer allegations, it's a finding. And then this organization, well, this coalition led by this organization, let me show you their website. They're going to haul Canada before the United Nations Human Rights Council, I guess, and Canada's going to be held accountable there. And if the council decides, well, they'll determine what the punishment essentially is going to be, which could include, here it is here, which could include losing voting rights on the Council for Canada. We're going to lose a voice. So now you're at the mercy of this body. You don't even get, Canada would no longer have a voice there. So, yeah. Here's the organization. Black Class Action, it's called. You can donate to them. They have a legal team, a diversity plan. It's like an international class action lawsuit. About the claim, a class action lawsuit has been filed in the Federal Court of Canada on behalf of Black Canadians. The lawsuit is seeking long-term solutions to permanently address systemic racism and discrimination in the public service of Canada. This action concerns systemic racism in the public service of Canada, directed at self-identifying Black individuals. I don't know how you identify, but anyway, who applied for employment with the public service of Canada and were denied entry based on their race, and those who were employed but were denied promotions based on their race. This includes current employees and those who have been employed within the past 52 years. Damages include the wrongful failure to promote, intentional infliction of mental suffering, constructive dismissal, wrongful termination, negligence, and in particular violations of employment law, human rights law, and charter breaches. As a result of systemic discrimination, Canada has failed to achieve equality in the workplace such that no person shall be denied employment opportunities or benefits for reasons unrelated to ability. In the fulfillment of the goal of workplace equality, Canada has failed to correct the conditions of disadvantage in employment experienced by Black Canadians. Equitable representation, a compensation fund, Black Equity Commission, eternal reporting mechanism, self-declaration. The federal government shall amend the self-declaration of visible minority to create a separate category for Black employees. And an apology. The Prime Minister of Canada shall issue a formal apology to all present and past Black employees of the public service for the injustices suffered in the past. If Canada is hauled before the UN, if any decisions levied at that United Nations Council are recognized as legitimate, Canadian government, Justin Trudeau, could be in a heap of trouble. Times, they have changed. What can I tell you? I just told you. UN, speaking of the UN Security Council, United Nations Security Council, passed a U.S. drafted ceasefire deal, which is aimed at halting 8 months of bloody fighting between Israel and Hamas. So this draft resolution, which we talked about the other night, it is something that was presented by Joe Biden, approved by him. It was finalized on Sunday after almost a week of negotiations among the 15 member council members. So for it to pass, this resolution needed a minimum of 9 votes in favor and 0 vetoes by the countries that have the power to send any ceasefire proposal back to the drawing board. And that includes China, Russia, France, Britain, the U.S. China didn't do anything to block it. Russia abstained. In March, China and Russia both vetoed a Gaza ceasefire resolution. They said at that time that it would give Israel a green light to attack Rafah. And before that, it was the U.S. that vetoed draft resolutions, 3 of them, 2 of which would have demanded an immediate ceasefire. Then on May 31st, this deal was announced by, or proposal was announced by Biden. He said that it was an Israeli deal. In reality, the truth of the matter is it wasn't an Israeli deal. This was something the U.S. came up with. It was at the time, in its original form, largely the proposal that had been tabled by Hamas about 2 weeks prior to that. And they did this, from all information coming out, Biden came out and made this announcement without even consulting Netanyahu or Israel. And that put Netanyahu into a bit of a corner. So, approved now at the UN, but it isn't really clear. I don't know if this is actually going to make any difference. I don't think the fighting has stopped, so we'll see. We'll see. More details coming out, too, about that rescue of the 4 hostages, the 4 Israeli hostages, and Hamas saying about 274 people, Palestinians, were killed in that operation. One of those hostages was held by, from reports coming out that this one hostage was being held by a journalist, an Al Jazeera journalist, apparently. For me, any journalist that does anything like that crosses the line. They're not a journalist at all. And I don't care what side you're on. You don't get involved in the conflict. You're there to report it. Everybody brings their own slant to things, some bias, of course. The Gaza issue, boy, I'll tell you, it is so divisive, so incredibly divisive, more divisive than anything I've ever seen. Sarah, who was on the program last night, I think that just from correspondence I've been receiving from her today, in the day after, her feeling the fallout from this, like all of us, including myself, a lot of response to the program last night, because we touched on a lot of things, from dating, relationships, changes in information technology, to Ukraine, to what's going on in Gaza. And Sarah messaged me, I think that she's getting probably some pressure from people, or maybe she's just worried about what people are going to think after all that was said last night, because it is so controversial, right? But I'll tell you, she did great. She put her positions forward, and I'll have more discussions with her, I'm sure, in the days ahead about how she's feeling about what happened, and I think she's a little bit concerned that maybe some people are going to be critical, or maybe they already have been, of what she said. I'll tell you, I've been hammered by people criticizing me based on what went down last night. But that's par for the course, man. That comes with being in the media game. But, here's a positive one. Great show last night. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that one. Received pretty negative one, though, this morning from somebody who I thought was a friend. I won't tell you who it is. This is from, never mind. I'll just read it to you. Thought I would watch tonight. Been a while. You bored her to tears, poor girl. Please stop being one-sided. You are an Israel and Ukraine and USA lover. Podcasters usually don't pick the evil sides. This girl has her opinions. Good for the younger generation. Stop trying to change her. I do. I love my country. Stand guilty as charged. If you don't, whatever. I pray for you. Pray for Canada. Pray for the United States. The countries have been infiltrated. Our governments have. I've just been talking about it. Foreign interference. We have corrupt, some, not all, some corrupt MPs, members of Parliament, working in the government. We know this to be true. That's the problem. Right there. Plus, foreign money flowing into our academic institutions, our post-secondary places of higher learning. You see the big protests out on the front lawns, flags being burned, people fighting in the streets. I'll tell you, you know what else is going on? The reason people can't figure stuff out is that people who are under foreign influence to one degree or another, some of these bad actors, people not acting in good faith because they've been corrupted or directed, maybe sometimes unwittingly, and sometimes, as the report indicated, sometimes wittingly. So some of these members of Parliament are well aware of what they are doing, but they are everywhere. It's all through our system. That's how they are destabilizing things as well. If you think it's just the Liberals or you think it's just the Conservatives, that's not what it is. They're putting these people in place everywhere so that there's infiltration everywhere. It might not even be illegal, but they put people of influence in everywhere. And the Liberal, with a few people in with the Liberals, some with the NDP, some with the Conservatives, some with a bunch with the PPC, it's additional smaller parties in the states. You'll find them in the Democrats and the Republicans. You'll find them in the Libertarians, and they get in there and they twist things around. They stir things up. They direct things here, and they destabilize stuff. And they are not good actors, and the foreign influence is designed to create instability. It's kind of like throwing a wrench into the gears of a machine. So when they become part of the system, they say, oh, here, I'm part of the system, but they're really there to muck up the gears. And when they get involved in something and they muck up the gears, then they sit there and they go, what a crappy system this is, and they create a problem. And then when people get upset enough, then they turn around and say, well, there's a solution. What's the solution? Authoritarianism, communism, fascism, communofascism, whatever it is that the foreign government or whatever outside influence wants to bring in. By bringing that in, it's like a coup. and then you eliminate the threat to the other country. It's sort of like a takeover. That's what it is. Yeah, it's a takeover. And that's what they're doing, folks. And that is the New World Order. You think that it's the system. I keep telling you, you got to save the system because the system is the only thing that can save us. No, they want to tear the system down, and you're helping them do it. That's the trick. Get it? Probably not. I don't think anybody's cluing in. That's why everybody's going, what the heck is going on? Well, it's just us under attack by some of those wild and crazy dictators. I'll be right back.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back. What else do we have for you tonight? We are really motoring through stuff here tonight. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She compared Donald Trump to Jesus. Now, all those people who say that the MAGA movement is a cult, they're having a field day. Here's what she said at the Trump rally. I think this is like a day ago.
The Democrats and the fake news media want to constantly talk about, oh, President Trump is a convicted felon. Well, you want to know something? The man that I worship is also a convicted felon. And he was murdered on a Roman cross.
Ooh, boy. Oh, wow. Yeah, she was at this Trump event in Las Vegas. It was yesterday. And, of course, she's up there railing against Trump's recent conviction on these trumped-up charges. Put the payment to Stormy Daniels. And, it's a cult. This reminded me so much of, I mean, it's not really quite the same thing, but her comparing Trump to Jesus made me think of the John Lennon quote, where he said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. And I was thinking back because of everything going on in our country and me talking about, the convergence of fascists and communists and communo-fascism. And, John Lennon was considered by a lot of people, some people anyway, to be a communist because of his outspoken views on peace, social justice, his criticism of the establishment. And here are some of the reasons why. Well, he did make these political statements, and he was an activist. He was very vocal about his political beliefs, especially during the late 1960s and early 1970s. He supported a lot of different left-wing causes and was involved in protests against the Vietnam War. I remember a lot of people, older people at the time, they would use phrases like pinkos and say you were anti-American if you went out to some of these Vietnam and anti-Vietnam War protests. And I think that there was some communism laced in with a lot of that. And then, the other thing that is a dead giveaway is Lennon's song Imagine, with its lyrics envisioning a world without possessions. You'll own nothing and be happy. No countries, open borders. No religion. So, what's that? That's seen by a lot of people as advocating for a utopian socialist society. Might be a great place to live in. Is it realistic? I love the song. But is it something that's actually workable? Well, I don't know. Lennon and Yoko Ono, who, of course, you know, if you're a youngster, you probably don't remember, but those two got hitched. And Ono and Lennon were associated with and supported radical figures and movements, including the Black Panthers and the anti-war movement, and that fueled suspicions about him being associated with communists. He was outspoken. He was a critic of capitalism, and the political establishment also contributed to the perception of him as a communist. He frequently expressed disdain for the materialism and inequalities he saw in society. I get it. Of course, I have also been to the Henry Ford Museum and to the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, where I saw, at different times, I'm pretty sure I saw the Rolls Royce that the Beatles had, and it was all painted, Lennon's. It was painted with like paisley and flowers and stuff, if I remember right. Anyway, it's not like capitalism didn't help Lennon. Very wealthy. The Beatles were. But you know, it just made me think of that. Oh, the controversy at the time when Lennon said the Beatles are more popular than Jesus. You ever really pay attention to the lyrics of Imagine? This, again, takes me back to my grade 10 English class with Mr. Beatty, where he would pull out the lyrics to Beatles songs, or a Lennon song, and just read them like poetry. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Collectivism can be interpreted that way. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. Words meant to unify. But sometimes those idealistic, utopian ideas are just not workable. They ignore the laws of economics, and they are laws. Natural laws. Idealistic. Yeah, I just see so many problems with making that work. So you have to get there a different way. Not to say that the goal isn't worthwhile. It certainly is. Anyway, just something to think about as our government in Canada and in the United States prepare to embark on a campaign of class warfare.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
Okay, let's go to... I didn't get to this clip earlier, and that's okay, because this clip of Trudeau will help us segue into some other material here that's sort of related. So we're going to come back. So we're coming back to talk about the foreign interference, which is related to what we were just talking about anyway. So here he is being asked today about this issue, after Jagmeet Singh from the NDP saying, let's investigate the Conservatives. Oh, which is also something I didn't comment on, I meant to. Why him? Why did he do this? Because Trudeau, it's not going to look right coming from him. These two guys are two peas in a pod. This allows Jagmeet Singh to score points, and for some reason, Trudeau's trying to stay arm's length from this. That's why it's coming from Jagmeet Singh, I think. I don't know if they're specifically coordinating on this strategy, but there's something going on in that regard. I'm pretty sure. I can just smell it. That's just my analysis of the strategy here. But here's JT on the issue.
Que j'avancerai en tant que Premier ministre.
Mr. Trudeau, you've seen the NSI COP report. Do you think the allegations in it rise to the level of treason?
I think it's extremely important that we continue to take foreign interference with all the seriousness that it requires, which is why we will be supporting the Bloc Québécois motion to send the report and the concerns raised in it to the Commissioner Hogg's work to make sure that there is a clear process whereby Canadians can have confidence in the integrity of the democracy.
Donc en français sur ceci, monsieur le...
So, and translation, they ain't going to tell you who those MPs are going into the next election. They're going to shuffle this off to a group over here who will then come back with a report saying, yeah, we looked at everything behind closed doors and, everything's fine. You can have your election. No, it'll have integrity. Don't you worry your little head. You just go on out there and cast your ballots and everything's going to be just fine. Don't you worry about those crazy, wild, crazy dictators influencing our election. That's me doing a really bad Steve Martin imitation. I've got a French accent in there somehow. Sorry. So typically Canadian. I'm telling you, that's what's happening. Going to make you feel good casting your ballot and not hold anybody accountable. All this going on, well, there seems to be an increased threat of terrorism in some European countries, so much so that travel warnings have been issued now by the government of Canada. They've issued travel advisories or warnings for several European destinations. They say there's a real threat of terrorism in Europe. Terrorists have carried out attacks in several European cities already over the past few years. In France, several opportunistic and premeditated attacks, according to this advisory, have occurred, and these have resulted in many deaths and injuries. And this advisory says that further attacks are likely. Now, the Olympic Games are coming up in Paris this summer, and France has been placed on the list of most potential terrorist targets. This according to both the Canadian and the French governments. So Canadians are being told that they should exercise, quote, a high degree of caution in France due to the elevated threat of terrorism. France has raised its security threat level to attack emergency. This is the highest rating in its national security alert system. This happened back on March 24th following a terrorist attack in Moscow that we saw kill 144 people. So people are being told to be always aware of your surroundings when in public places. And this advisory says that Canadians, all people really, should be particularly alert during public gatherings and demonstrations. Boy, I'll tell you, this is the new normal in Europe, and it's coming to this country too. In fact, in many respects, it's already here, isn't it? Key sites and transport hubs will have enhanced security measures, and greater numbers of police and military forces are going to be present all through, holidays and in public places, including tourist locations, as well as at major landmarks. So the Canadian government says the places that terrorists may target include schools, churches, synagogues, cultural destinations, government buildings, exhibition galleries, concert halls, theaters, airports, galleries, railway stations, transportation hubs, shopping centers, restaurants, bars, coffee shops, markets, hotels, pretty much anywhere. Anywhere you go. It's a long list. They just kind of, I think, looked around and said, oh, yeah, it could happen there, it could happen there, it could happen there. So just be aware. If you need to see that travel advisor, I think there's a government website where you can go and find it. I don't have the URL for it, sorry, folks. I just have a release here, but I'm sure more information is available on the government website, but it's basically telling you, be careful, is what it comes down to. And this advisory is really particularly focused on Italy, France, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Sweden, Spain, Belgium, Denmark, Germany. So those are the hot countries right now, heading into the summer. What else do I have here? I don't know. Do you think Trump is like Jesus? I don't think so. Not quite. I don't even think Trump thinks of himself that way. But people do idolize him. There's no question about that. There is I don't know, there's something about the whole Trump movement thing. Strange thing. Did you see this story about this? Well, let me tell you first about what's going on in Quebec. $750 million. I think I touched on this, but I didn't tell you the story. $750 million fund going to be offered up from the federal government to the province of Quebec to deal with the surge in immigration. Where'd my information go on that? Well, I think it's self-explanatory anyway. I'm just doing this from memory. I lost my notes on it. We can just move on, I guess. No, here we go. So it's Ottawa is going to give Quebec $750 million. This will help cover a surge in temporary immigrants to Quebec. This will give them the money while committing to process asylum claims, giving them the ability to process them more quickly and to distribute possible refugees or would-be refugees all across Canada. So they announced these details, or this program in more detail today. And The Premier of Quebec has been asking Ottawa for $1 billion to cover costs incurred from 2021 to 2023. And so he did get 3/4 of that amount, but he still hasn't received a firm number from Trudeau on how many asylum seekers and other temporary immigrants will be cut. So what the Premier is saying is, he's got a statement out. He says, quote, "What is urgent is to substantially and quickly reduce the number of temporary immigrants in Quebec. At least the federal government is telling us they recognize there's a problem. They even recognize that they have to act quickly in the short term in a significant way, but they refuse to give numbers." So Legault has said that 560,000 temporary immigrants in Quebec. This is a number that the government says has about doubled in the past 2 years, that it's putting an unbearable amount of pressure on, of course, social services in the province, and that it's threatening the future of the French language. Isn't that interesting? Quebec has always been very protective of their culture, especially of their language. They've been given special treatments, even special sovereign powers within the province itself in order to preserve the language and the culture. And we're seeing that this immigration is having a direct impact on French heritage, French culture, French language. We're being told that, yet the rest of the country, I think, is under similar pressure. But no special provisions being made in the rest of Canada. This is the reason that people are getting upset. So Legault went on to say today that Quebec is, quote, "Quebec has direct or indirect control over more than half of temporary immigrants in Quebec." Sorry, that's what Trudeau is saying. And Trudeau goes on and says that, so to have targets to reduce immigration, if that's what Quebec wants, they have to present a plan to reduce or adjust their numbers to respond to their needs. And so he's putting a little bit of pressure back. But they're getting money. They're getting some, I would say, special consideration over there in Quebec on the immigration issue in order to make sure the French language isn't destroyed and French culture. What about the rest of the country? I guess we will have to wait and see. I see a lot of pressure on our infrastructure, on our healthcare system, schools, all of our institutions. It's all there. The changing demographics, it's just a reality. We're going to have to learn to live with it, get along. But also, I think that we need to just be responsible about the levels of immigration that we allow. Just from a strictly a numbers point of view, we need to make sure that we have the resources in place, including housing, to take care of all the people who come here and the people who are already here, so that people have roofs over their heads and that they get the care that they need, that they have employment opportunities and everything else, so that people come here and they can be contributing members of our society. If it's not handled responsibly, things will ravel and start to fall apart. So here's this highway in Wyoming. Oh, the wildfire story first. I guess we've been talking a little bit about the wildfires, but so far it hasn't been as bad as it was last year. And so this wildfire in Fort Nelson, BC, it did force many people to evacuate from the town. Apparently, we're being told tonight that the wildfire that did force 4,700 people to leave their homes in Fort Nelson is now under control. So the BC Wildfire Service has issued a statement saying that the 123 square kilometer fire in northern British Columbia is not expected to grow beyond its current boundary, and all evacuation alerts in that area connected to that fire have now been lifted. So that's very, very good news. And even though I know it's been, it was a dry spring, we didn't get that much snow in many places, and so you didn't get a lot of moisture into the earth. over the winter. So far, I think we're doing a lot better than we were last year. The wildfires last year were much, much worse. So keep your fingers crossed, and hopefully, things don't get out of control again. Now, what was it that I was going to touch on here next? We had, oh yeah, the highway in Wyoming. This is crazy. So this is part of Teton Pass, a crucial highway that goes through the mountains of western Wyoming. So on Saturday, I didn't see this. It was sent to me just overnight this morning. A huge section of this highway just literally fell off a cliff. Officials say that they expect the road will remain closed there for the long term, potentially jeopardizing almost half of the workforce in and around that area, in that tourist area, which includes Jackson Hole, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton National Park. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not familiar with that name. And you have crews out there still examining the site, and they're trying to figure out how are they going to rebuild this thing. It's pretty crazy, man. Here, I'm going to show you some video of this. Let me bring it up on the screen. You won't believe it. It's erosion, I guess, that leads to this kind of stuff. Here we go. This is video from the Wyoming Department of Transportation. And let's take a look. So that's before. And this is today. Insane or what? Wow. Isn't that crazy? Going to have huge economic impacts in the area because that's a key piece of infrastructure that connects people, gets people to and from work, brings in, all kinds of goods by truck. So nobody injured in that thing. So carved into the mountain range and it runs for about 17 miles. It's the only direct route between Victor, Idaho and Jackson, Wyoming. Despite being notoriously treacherous at some times of the year, and typically it's closed during those times because of concerns related to weather, that highway provides vital access to that whole area, which I said is kind of a touristy area. And they had a study completed last January on the safety of that corridor, and the Federal Highway Administration acknowledged that the highway offers a critical connection for commuters and recreationists. And they're going to have to figure out some way to put that thing back together, but they're going to need, I need some fill in my backyard to raise up some patio stones. I need some sand or something because it's been sinking, but they're going to need a lot of fill to fix that highway. They got to rebuild the whole cliff. Isn't that amazing? Truly amazing. Okay, special treat coming up. My dad, in his 90s, called me the other day. Well, I called him, and he was telling me a story. He actually made the local paper because he still works in his 90s. He's a handyman down at this trailer park. And he just loves getting up and keeping busy and doing stuff. And he cuts the grass, he chops wood, he fixes people's plumbing, and he's just going all the time. I can't keep up with him. He's in his 90s. And they did a story in the local newspaper, and he got an honorary mention in the paper, I guess this past week. So just a local newspaper. So he was reading me the article, and then I thought I gotta get my dad on the show, because not about all of that stuff so much, although I'm really proud of him, and I want to get him on because my dad is like a joke encyclopedia. He just rattles them off one after the other. He has them all memorized. In fact, for Christmas, my son bought him a joke book, and I think he just memorized another whole joke book. He's just got all these jokes. So I said, "Hey, Dad, you got to come on the show tonight, and we need you to cheer people up with a joke." So these are dad jokes, and you have to remember that this is all from the before times. Okay, so which of course I yearn for. So stay tuned, because when we come back, we are going to have my dad on, and he's going to tell us a joke or two. So yeah, stay with me.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media outlets publishing things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
In an ocean of lies a century deep, the truth awaits. Choose not the red pill. Choose not the blue pill. For both are an illusion. Discover the power of M. The power of individuality. We are Mavericks. We are the way to the light. Fear not the storm. Join our quest for truth. Truth will set you free. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, I'm all set. Tell me your dad joke.
A lady looking out into her yard sees two crows, and they seem to be stuck together. They're flapping their wings, seem to be having an awful time. So she went out to check it, and she found out they're Velcros. Okay. Okay.
Oh.
And I got another.
Give me another one. Give me something better.
Give him a better one. Okay. There's a fella and his wife looking out their kitchen window into the garden, and the wife says to her husband, "We've got to replace that scarecrow out there. It's been there quite a while, you know." Her husband says, "Why would we want to replace it? Goodness sakes, he's doing a great job. He's keeping all the birds away." And she says, "I agree, but my mother can't stay out there forever, you know."
Okay. Tell me one more. Tell me another one.
Give him a better one.
Give me a better one.
A better one. There's a store manager in a big department store. He notices one of his employees is arguing with the customer. They're having quite an argument, and he's watching. And finally, the customer storms out of the store, angry as can be. So the manager walks over to the employee and says, "I noticed you're arguing with the customer. What was that argument about?" The employee said, "Well, sir, it was..." "Now, just a minute," says the manager. "You know that our policy in this store is the customer is always right." "Yes, sir, I know that, but no buts about it. The customer is always right." "Now, what was that argument about?" "Well, sir, he called you an idiot." Okay?
Okay.
Does that help?
All right. How do you remember all these jokes, Dad?
Oh, I don't know. I don't.
I don't fill my head full of them like you do. I don't know. You're like a joke encyclopedia.
Okay, hold on. I've got one more for you.
Okay.
Two old ladies sitting on a park bench, and they're enjoying the sunny afternoon and watching people go by. And finally, one lady says to her partner that she says, "You know, I think we better get the move. My arse is going to sleep." And the other lady says, "I know. I've heard it snore 3 times."
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think the people have probably heard enough now.
Okay, buddy.
All right.
I'm going to finish my dinner now.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks. That wraps up our broadcast for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. Same channel, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we will catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.